You're listening to Learning How to Live, the podcast about what happens after you wake up from the life you were told to want. I'm Quinn Stainfield-Bruce, and 6 years ago my best attempt at life had failed. Now I'm learning how to rebuild work, love, health, and self-worth, and I'm inviting you to learn alongside me. Let's get into it. In nearly every job that I had, I lied to myself 5 times before I walked in the building. I woke up and lied to myself that I cared about the job, that I cared about the product that I sold, that I cared about my colleagues, that I cared about the clients, that I cared about the company at all. It was nearly always a means to an end. I was working to live. I worked to live. I worked so that I could make money to do the things that we do. I needed to pay bills, or I wanted to go on holiday, or I wanted things. I worked to live. And I think, like a huge amount of people, that concept does not cut it anymore. It used to, maybe, once upon a time, and we'll explore in this podcast why that may have worked in the past, why working to live as a thing was a mode that worked. But today, if you look at things like research polls like Gallup, 91% of people in the UK want to leave their jobs. The vast majority of people at work globally, I think over 80% are not engaged when they turn up to work. And the funny thing is that this is actually costing the global workforce, I think something like $8.9 trillion a year, I think was the Gallup stat. I can pull it up and re-reference it. It's costing a lot of money. So it's not just the individual's perspective of just not feeling work, but it's also what it's actually costing organizations, costing business, costing the global workforce. It's a problem. So I know there'll be those out there who will be able to relate to what I have to say. There was nothing wrong with the places that I've worked in the past. Some of them were great companies, great people. I'm sure very good products that did very good jobs. I just didn't care. And there's only so long that I could go on not caring about what I did for work. We spend 80% of our lives at work, 80% of our lives. We can't just be doing it so that we can pay the bills and eat groceries. Now, I'm going to come on to explain how purpose can be found in any job. It's not about doing something that is life-changing or world-changing. Sometimes it could be, the job itself doesn't matter. It's how we as individuals align to it that really counts. Right? This isn't, the grand irony is there's actually nothing wrong necessarily with the businesses or the careers or the vocations out there. It's our relationship with them that's the problem. And I'll come on to explore that. But look, to touch on my backstory around this, again, my core beliefs of low self-worth and not feeling lovable meant that I had to make money so that I could feel good about myself. I had to make money so that I could buy things that would change how I feel. And very early on, when I was 18 years old, I launched my first consultancy and it did pretty well. There was periods of time where we were turning over a couple of million. And, we were working with the world's most famous brands. And, it was amazing. And, we had a pretty cool offering. We had a pretty cool product. And, but, if I really reflect on how much I cared, I cared because of what I could get out of it. And this is such a common theme in the life of the self-obsessed, is that we can appear to care hugely about people, places, and things, But the truth is, it's nearly always anchored in what we're getting out of it. So, you know, I may well have appeared very passionate about the business, but it was because it gave me affirmation. You know, I was 18, you know, working with global CMOs of big corporations, you know, to my friends or to prospective romantic partners, that, you know, to my family, to peers, that, you know, I looked very impressive. And I suppose in some respects it was very impressive. But did I care about what I was actually doing? I can't say not really. I cared about how much acclaim I could generate. And I was making a lot of money for someone my age, especially compared to a lot of my peers, most of whom were actually just at university. And this facilitated a lifestyle. I was living in central London. It meant I could go out. It meant I could party. It meant I could drink, do drugs, whatever I wanted to do, I could do. And so it worked. And it worked until it didn't work, which was, you know, after my daughter, who I touched on, had to have a liver transplant when she was a baby, and, you know, the emotional duress that I sort of put myself through. I got married at 25. My daughter was born. I decided, you know, going from quite a humble lifestyle, that I needed to then move to a very expensive area, get a very expensive car. You know, my ex-wife at the time sort of stopped working, so I put a lot on my shoulders at that point and needed more money. And when my business couldn't generate that money, I went out to look for it elsewhere. And so all of my relationships with various careers or various companies I worked for were about what I could get from it. And I was an extreme, but I think most people, to one degree or another, are like this. They go into a job based on what they can get out of it, not what they can do for other people. And that might seem like a weird concept to think about, you know, when you turn up to work somewhere and you go in with the mindset of what you can give rather than what you can take. I imagine for most people, it's a weird thing to get one's head around. You turn up, you do a job, you get paid, you go home. And for a lot of people, that's good enough. For a lot of people, it's not. Especially high achievers, you know, people who work in, you know, big consultancies, or people who work in you know, profound lawyers or experts in their industries. People can find themselves climbing ladders, getting to the very top, and asking themselves time and time again, is this it? You know, people can build up businesses, sell their companies, have generate a lot of wealth, and then still say to themselves, is this it? You know, this idea that that it's never really enough. And, you know, so for me, going from one job to another, uh, in the pursuit of more, ultimately led me to a point where I crashed when the realization hit that money was never going to make me happy. It was never going to solve my problems. I had no, I had nowhere else to go. I had no more plan. I had no more strategy. I had no more ideas. And that was when I walked into rehab and started the 6-year journey that I've been on, where, you know, where I've been learning how to live. So when it comes to work today and what I do, I went on an interesting journey over the last 6 years, where initially I totally railed against, you know, traditional infrastructure and traditional ways of doing work. And, you know, I'm still very much a capitalist. I don't, you know, I love making money. I love money. Money is wonderful. I love what it can facilitate. But I realized that money being the purpose, that was not going to work. You know, it's a common misconception when people think, you know, money is the root of all evil. It's a misquote, right? It's money. It's nothing. Money is not the root of all evil. The love of money is the root of all evil. Or so the quote goes. Right? There's nothing wrong with money. There's nothing wrong with making money. There's nothing wrong with making loads of money. It's you know, like wealth and abundance is a wonderful, wonderful thing. When we make it our higher power, when we make money, when we align our worthiness to money, as I've explained in a previous episode, that's where the problems come. So initially I thought maybe I'll be a teacher. There's nothing wrong with, again, wrong with being a teacher. I just decided that I don't think I'd actually want to do that. I think I'd probably get maybe a little bit bored ultimately. But I felt like I wanted to just, having pursued the biggest salaries I could for most of my life, I then was like, okay, I just need to do something that's good for my soul. And I went to university, etc., and came out the other side. Now, what I discovered was, well, life-changing. And then I'm going to share these two things with you now, because one of them is about purpose. And purpose is a bastardized word today. Sometimes in business, it's just seen as being, latching oneself onto a charity in some way. But it's totally misunderstood as a deeply human quality. And the other is the Japanese model of Ikigai. The Japanese have a philosophy for, if you want to be happy at work, then you need to follow the Ikigai model, and I'll explain that in a moment. But first of all, let's talk about purpose, because purpose, I had no understanding of purpose, but my purpose up until coming into recovery was anchored in changing how I felt, right? Like, so my purpose really was drugs, or in one form or another, whether it was food or sex or whatever. It was something that I could get that would change how I felt. And that's how I live my life. I don't like how I feel. I'm going to change how I feel, which is obviously a completely unsustainable purpose. The first thing I had to learn is that there are, in fact, two forms of purpose. There's not just purpose. People think purpose is outer purpose, right? Which is the second form of purpose. People think purpose is something you do, and that's only half the story. If purpose was something you do, then what happens when you've done it? You are purposeless. You have to come up with a new purpose. It doesn't make any sense. It's not sustainable. The answer is in the first half of purpose, which is about inner purpose. Inner purpose is a state of being. Inner purpose doesn't change. Inner purpose is not a state of doing, it is a state of being. Inner purpose is a feeling. Inner purpose is a North Star that never changes. It's the points on a compass that we follow. And we know that when we're aligned to that inner purpose, that wherever life takes us, we probably won't have any regrets. And, it gets a little woo-woo, I guess. Not that I want to probably ban the term woo-woo. I don't think it's necessary anymore. But I guess there is a spiritual quality to inner purpose, because it's, for me, my inner purpose is around love. If I wanted to get super spiritual about it, in an episode about work, then I'd be talking about, purpose is to wake up. Purpose is to wake up to truth. Purpose is to wake up to presence, awaken consciousness. But let's pull back from that a little bit. Practically, my inner purpose is around love. I try, as my North Star, to act from a place of love as much as I possibly can. I try, when I wake up in the morning, to align to my inner purpose that is love, so that I can interact with my romantic partner, or my children, or my dog, or my colleagues, or strangers, or whoever I may come into contact with, from a place of love. Because I know that if I do that, then I'm not going to have any regrets. I know that even if someone screams and shouts at me for something, maybe it's justified, maybe it's not. I know that if I try and carry myself from a place of love, I'm not going to have an amends to make for my actions. And that's what I strive for. But from that very ethereal place, that inner purpose of love, I can then start to look at what my outer purpose might be like. So what action am I taking today? Right? What do I have to do today? And how do I do it from a place of love? I need to record a podcast today. Okay, well, I don't want to do it because I want to strive for fame or fortune. I want to do it because I really want to carry a message. That's what I'm trying to do right now. Whether, if one person watches this and gets something from it, then I can be satisfied, because my whole point, my whole purpose in doing it, the outer purpose of recording this podcast, comes from an inner place of love that I just want to share what I've experienced so that someone else might be able to benefit from it. Anything else after that's a bonus. So that's one example of how inner purpose translates to outer purpose. Let's say that my ex-wife said, could you pick us up from the airport? Kids are tired. They miss you. And I think to myself, well, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be inconvenienced. I don't want to have to drive, in the afternoon in traffic or whatever. But then I connect back with my inner purpose, and I want to be of service. I want to act from a place of love. I want to be helpful. I want to help. And so I make the decision. I say, okay, yeah, I can help. I can be of service. I won't regret that. I might regret being stuck in traffic at times, but I will not regret the act of service. Whereas without an inner purpose, the ego's running the show. Without being able to connect to my North Star, without being able to align to those compass points of love, my ego steps in. Could you give us a lift? Absolutely not. Can't be bothered. It's traffic. I don't owe you anything. Get a taxi. It's not my problem. That's not a way. That's not a way to live. I'm not going to feel ultimately good about that. I might in the immediate term, but it's not going to help me. It's not going to help my soul. It's not going to help my purpose. It's not going to help how I interact with the world. So, it's really important. Again, I could wake up in the morning and I could be stressed about something or anxious or distracted. But if I remind myself every morning to return to that center point of love, that inner purpose of love, I stand a chance of being the best version of myself I can be. I stand a chance at not losing my temper on a school run. I stand a chance at not getting overly fearful or stressed about some situation in the future. I just can know that I'm stepping out in the world and trying my best. So how does that apply to work? How does that apply to career? Well, I suppose there's two ways of looking at it. Number one would be if you were looking for a job. And number two is how does it relate to the job that one's already in? Well, in my case, if I am trying to operate from a place of love, and I want that love to manifest as an outer purpose for me, as a job, as a career, then I start to formulate thoughts and ideas. Like, there's a formula that goes a little bit like this. What am I passionate about? Now, I can tell you that today I'm passionate about helping people. There's nothing that brings me more joy than actually helping people, watching people grow, being of service. Okay, and I'm passionate about spiritual growth, therapeutic growth. These are things that I fill my time with. The books I read, the way the meditations I practice, the spirituality I pursue, these are all passions of mine. Okay, so there's passion. Now let's add talent. What am I talented at? Well, I think I'm quite good at public speaking. I think I understand a lot of quite abstract things, and I think I understand ways in which I can explain them in sort of more simple ways that people might be able to understand. I know that I'm also very talented. I'm very empathetic. I'm very good at seeing how other people are feeling. I'm very good at reading how they are and what's going on for them. I'm very good at seeing behind the masks that people put up. And that allows me to have, really honest, fun conversations with people and perhaps show them things that they're not necessarily willing to acknowledge in the moment, but perhaps want to. Well, that allows for me to help people in a really profound way. Okay, so passion times talent. Okay, then what else? Well, what associations do I have? Who do I know? What institutions am I a part of that could help facilitate this? And then finally, action. What action can I take? And in this case, I'm recording a podcast to help people. Where does it go? I don't know. Maybe it goes somewhere, maybe it goes nowhere. But what I'm doing is I'm taking action nonetheless. I'm taking action into the unknown. So I've taken my core, my inner purpose of love. I've looked at things that I'm passionate about, things I'm talented, associations I might have, and then actions I can take, and then I take it. And that starts unfolding into the world. And this is how outer purpose emerges. I don't know whether through doing this podcast, I might garner further awareness, or it might lead to a career somewhere else, or maybe it'll inspire me to write a book. Who knows, right? But the point is, without taking action, nothing happens. But in taking the action, I'm creating opportunities for other things to unfold. But the best example for me professionally is my business Humanness, which is all about the restoration of human qualities to the heart of business. Now, I spent 20 odd years in corporate life. I spent 20 odd years working in multinationals. I understand the inner workings of big organizations. And I also have this absolute love and passion for helping human beings. And where those two things come together, a business formulated, an idea formulated of a way that I can really, really be of service. And that is my current outer purpose. And I am prepared that my outer purpose could change. Right now, it's recording a podcast. In the week, it might be speaking with, some big food or drinks company, but that's great because I welcome the constant change of outer purpose because I know I'm being guided by my inner purpose. So this is a really powerful tool for one to be, to be aligned. But then how can you perhaps apply this to your day to day? And this is where the Japanese model of Ikigai comes in. And it's really, really powerful. And it's changed the game for a lot of people, especially when it comes to feeling purposeful at work. And I will come on to what one can do about that in a minute. Ikigai. So there's 4 parts to it. When thinking about one's vocation, does the world need it? Am I good at it? Do I love it? And can it pay me to live? These are the 4 things that the Japanese believe. If you have all 4, you have Ikigai, which is the perfect combination for one's career. And so I look at it with my business Humanness. Does the world need it? Absolutely. Human qualities restored to the heart of business? Yes. Can it pay me to live? Yes. Got a model, consultancy-based model. I know how that works. Yes, it can. Do I love it? Yes. I love helping people. I love watching people grow. I love watching soul restored into organizations and teams and business units and individuals. Am I good at it? Yes. For reasons I explored earlier in talents and whatnot. So where you have all 4 of those things, there's something quite powerful. I would challenge a lot of people listening now when thinking about their role in their career. Certainly, like I spent 22 years where a lot of those questions I wouldn't have been able to answer yes to. Working, for me in marketing, a lot of the times, if I ask myself, hand on heart, does the world need it? The answer is no. It doesn't mean that it shouldn't be there. It shouldn't be a thing. It doesn't mean that other people might not find it brilliant. But for me, asking myself if I need some tech software or whatever, does the world need it? Would the world, like, if this disappeared tomorrow, would anyone notice? And the answer is usually not really. And the thing is, this is the sort of stuff that we have to acknowledge. Do I love what I do? And sometimes, yeah, you do. That's great. But what if you don't? In answering these sort of big sort of existential questions, like, does the world need what I do? Sometimes there's ways of justifying it. Sometimes the obvious answer is no. I mean, if one worked in, say, tobacco or alcohol or firearms, you could argue either way. But the real, without having to run away from one's job, if one is feeling lack of purpose and low engagement, there is a way to resolve it. But it again requires inner work. And so, tying back to the idea of learning how to live, work is no different to romantic relationships or anything else. The inner work allows us to know ourselves. Doing inner work, doing therapy, getting deep, practicing very deep self-honesty allows us to uncover things. So let's say someone's working somewhere that they find boring. Let's say it's an insurance firm and they're paid well and, they've got their overheads covered and the job's pretty safe, but they just find it boring. Let's say they're just dealing with insurance for something incredibly dull. Well, if they were being able to be really honest with themselves, they would be able to go in and say, well, what are my values? What do I believe in? How do I get to be of service to the world? And, how do the values of this organization, how do the values of the product that I am involved with, that I work with, that I build, that I'm aligned to, that I help facilitate, how do my values align to those values? Because if one can find where the coherence exists between them and the organization or the product that they're involved with, then one can start to generate purpose, right? It's not just this job that one has to do so they can go on their 2 holidays a year or pay the mortgage or buy groceries. Suddenly, when one acknowledges that, integrity is important to them and that there is an integrity to the thing that they do, then one can work from that place. And then from there, engagement starts to grow and flourish. It's not just a thing. We're not just working to live at that point. And so what I'm trying to stress here is the power of the inner work and the power of being able to be really honest with oneself, to say, well, if the world doesn't need what I do, then where is the magic in it for me? To be able to perhaps go into the mythology of the organization and its own roots and where it came from and why the founders of that organization created it in the first place, and being able to align one's day-to-day to that. And it really doesn't matter how menial the job is or how high-flying it may appear to be. It really is the same process. So there's a lot more that could be shared around work, and I look forward to having a lot of guests who from all different walks of life to explore this concept with, because it is a problem today. Work and people's relationships with work, and in the wake of AI, is generating even more fear. Most big organizations are generally looking at solving most of their problems by laying off lots of people. People are feeling very insecure at work. There's a lot of fear going on. And so something does have to be done. And what I believe passionately is it's about the restoration of soul, the restoration of human qualities to the day-to-day operations. And so it's something passionately close to my heart that we will absolutely explore. But what I wanted to touch on, from the perspective of learning how to live, is how my journey of my therapeutic journey, my journey of self-honesty and self-discovery, my own hero's journey has led me to really understand the spirituality behind one's relationship with work and how that can be capitalized on, no matter what it is. So yeah, watch this space and we'll explore more as time goes on. But yeah, thank you for listening. and see you again next time. Thanks for listening to Learning How to Live. If this sparked something for you, share it, subscribe, and remember, you don't have to escape your life. You can build one worth staying for.